Tips from Trestle is brought to you by eMenu Choice Point of Sale, Wyzox AI, and Benny Keith Foods. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it.
Welcome, Chrystal Hawley, to talk to us today about work-life integration. And so Chrystal is the Regional Director of Operations for Oak Senior Living. She's been in the industry for 15 years, and she's a nurse by trade, and she started her career in long-term care back in 2021. She lives in Winder, Georgia, and she's got 4 little ones. So, Chrystal, thank you so much for being with us today. Let's get started.
Yeah.
So, I guess give us a little bit of your background, and then let's talk about how that transitioned you to think about time and how you approach it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little correction. I actually, since 2001, been in long-term care throughout hospital settings, again, nurse by trade, stepped into operations a couple years ago from that regional nursing role. I have 4 children. They're not all little. So 3 are a lot older. 1 is 7. And so I feel like that is important to preface, because at one point in my life, I was an executive director in a community, and I had a newborn, a child in elementary school, a child in middle school, and a child in high school. So it was a very, very busy time. And I think during that time, or really after that whirlwind settled, really piqued my interest into digging in and researching the value of time and my personal relationship with time, right? So when I'm looking at time, and there's been other things along the way that have made me stop, right? Most of the time when someone is unfortunately having to evaluate time, it's because a tragedy, a trauma, you're stopped in your footsteps because of something severe, right? So several things have made me stop and reevaluate my personal relationship with time. And so when we're thinking about time, your mindset is either positive or negative. It's either you think, oh gosh, you have all the time in the world. That's how I felt in my 20s, all the time in the world, right? And then other times you're like, I'm too busy. I don't have any time. So the way I like to kind of look at the seasons of life are almost like a continuous hourglass, right? So sometimes in your life, you feel like you have a lot of time, right? And then you have seasons where your relationship or your perspective of time narrows, and then it opens back up. So it depends on what season you're in. I think personally, there was also one kind of traumatic experience that stopped me in my footsteps and said, you know what? You're not in your 20s anymore. There is something happening where you may not have a lot of time, right? And so that just kind of changed the perspective of how I view it. And I think, again, when we're talking about work-life integration, I use the term integration because when you think about work-life balance, and that's kind of the trendy terminology that people throw out, work-life balance, but the way that feels in my heart and soul and spirit is I don't want it to be balanced, because I love my job. I love my life's work. I feel like I'm called for a purpose. However, if it's a balance, that seems 50-50 to me. And yes, I want my life's work to be valuable and important, but there's a whole other side of my life, including, my kids, what brings me joy, socialization, that I don't want that just to be 50% of my life. And that's why I'm really keen on using the word integration, because there's times that I have to stop and think, I am leaning too heavy on my work side, and I need to make sure that I'm integrating the daily life of what brings me joy into that work life. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm weigh heavily upon integration and not balance, right?
I love the fact that you say work-life integration as it relates to work-life balance, because I think we get that like you said, it's got to go back and forth between work and life and how that's all done. It's a refreshing way to look at it. And so,
Absolutely. And even just the simple, I think a lot of this is about storytelling when you reflect on what you want your life to look like, especially when it comes to time and how you're effective and how you spend your time. So just that story about your fingernails, when you walked in that community, I'm sure you had a great story to tell, and that, brings joy, and I'm sure it brings you joy. So I think that's great. That's a perfect example of integration.
as we were prepping this, one of the things that we discussed a little bit was it's a constant struggle, right? Kind of this tug of war between work and life and all the little things and doing that. So if someone is dealing with that struggle on what they of all of this, what kind of advice would you give them in how they can start looking at things differently and how they can start using the work-life integration concepts for themselves?
That's a great question. So I feel like you have to start very broad. So when I started doing time studies, when I started reaching out to kind of those that I felt like from the outside looked successful and they looked like they had a good work-life integration, which that can always be deceiving, right? But when I started kind of researching this, in my heart, I'm like, what do I want my life to look like, right? Yes, I want to do my life's work. Yes, I still want to be in senior care. I want to senior living industry. But what does my home life look like? Obviously not perfect, but what do I want that to look like? What do I want that to feel like? So starting broad, and then based on what I wanted it to look like, what were those needle movers or milestones that I would have to put in place to get there? Lots of people talk about consistent morning routine, but not everybody's a morning person, right? So what I want my life to look like in the morning compared to everybody else may be different. So I think you have to, again, be broad and narrow in. So what do you want your life to look like in general? What do you want your next 10 years to look like? What do you want your next 5 years to look like? What's the next year? Have you planned for the quarter? Have you looked at your month? What is your day, week? So you get more narrow as you go. So again, going back to that hourglass, start broad, go narrow. So when I got to the narrow perspective, I would focus on, and this is what I still do today, daily, I have 3 focuses, period. Now, lots of people have a laundry list of things to do every day. But if I'm focused on 3 things and I start those 3 things early, I'm going to get those done. So I use the 3-1 rule, and I focus on 3 things for work, 1 thing personally a day. Now, the 1 thing personal a day, maybe you have to get your kids to softball at night or soccer at night and go to the grocery store and pick up lab work. But those are constants. We're talking about the variables. So if I want to organize an office, or if I want to make sure a certain amount of planning is done for an event that I have, that is my extra 1 thing. That does not include the other stuff, those consistent things that are just daily living activities. So start broad and narrow it down.
So one thing I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit about is, I think a lot of times, I know that sometimes I'm guilty of this, especially now that I'm an entrepreneur, and I sometimes find it hard to say no, right? Because as I'm doing things like, I've got to run my business, but I also need to get business, and I need to do this for this person, or I need to do this for that person to make sure I'm keeping those relationships and building them stronger. And sometimes I overextend myself, and so when you think about that, think about your process you just described, what kind of advice or what kind of experiences can you share with us about the always saying yes or making it hard to say no, people like myself?
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in a world of people pleasers, right? And until you learn to set those boundaries and say no, you're not going to move the needle forward. So I was one of those people pleasers. I still am sometimes. And what I've learned over the last couple of years, you have to show yourself grace. So number one, I would say it's okay to reset. So if you do overextend, it's okay to reset and stop overextending moving forward, or at least for the next couple of months. So when things get out of control and you're not focused on those three things or that one thing at home and you're saying yes to everything, again, go back, reset, whether that's the next day, the next week, the next month, show yourself grace and be able to reset. Another thing, and this is not originally from me, but I say it most days of the week, if it's not a heck yes, it's a heck no. That wasn't the original verbiage that came with that saying, but if it's not a heck yes, it's a heck no. So setting those boundaries, what can you do? What do you feel comfortable with? Does it align with how you want your life to look? And if it doesn't align, get it over, move it for another time. I feel like people are more apt to respect you if you say no than they will be if you overextend and don't perform to the quality that you should be.
Yeah, that last piece makes a lot of sense. When I was on the operator side, I was way, way, way better at that. So I do think sometimes that shift in your perspective can cause you to, I don't call it relapse, but like I figured it out and then I kind of changed what I was doing. And before we move on to something a little bit different, when I think about some of the things you said, sometimes when you're, say, an executive director, it's hard to feel like you can say no, right? Because you have pressures coming up from frontline staff and residents. Then you got pressures coming down from owners, investors, corporate, and it feels like sometimes you're being pulled in both directions, and sometimes they're very, very different needs and wants. Thinking about that time in your life when you were an executive director and you realized this was important, what kind of advice would you give for kind of that level of director in our industry to get more comfortable with no, get really comfortable with the right kinds of yeses and make this work for them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So number one, before we get into that, what I'd love to say is I look back and I feel like I took for granted the opportunity to be able to manage in the middle. People grasp for success so quickly that they want to grow. And growth is great, right? But what a wonderful opportunity to be in the middle and manage from the middle, because you've got mentors and supervisors and people you report directly to that can speak over to you, help give you wisdom, guidance, that sort of thing. But also with that comes pressure. Like you said, is it reports? Is it meeting goals, meeting standards, meeting metrics, that sort of thing. And then you've got people that you're leading, right? And so for your team, I feel like when I was an executive director, I did feel like I had to support my team so much that, yeah, that was tough. It was tough to say no, right, to things. And again, when, our CEO or direct supervisors are asking you things, lots of people feel like a people pleaser. They feel like they have to get all that stuff done, right? So again, looking back, I definitely feel like I would have done that differently. But if I could step into those shoes today, I would have listened more to the specific direction of a framework I was giving. So if I'm an executive director and there is a framework regarding meetings or regarding, deadlines for certain reports, I feel like I would go back and live in my calendar more. So I have a firm belief in kind of living by a calendar, because if you're not scheduling it, most likely somebody else is going to take your time. So if you can't control your own time, then somebody else is going to scoop in and schedule something for you or take that time out from under you, right? So one of the things, again, if I could go back and have known at the time, I feel like I would have set those boundaries around the meetings or around the framework and use that time more wisely to be effective during those times. We can work a framework, but if we're not using that specific allotted time to be effective with your, let's say, wellness director or food service director and holding tight to that schedule, then things go out the door. So again, it's all about, hey, 1, 2, 3, I would have used that back then. Maybe it's my one-on-one with a food service director that day, my one-on-one with a wellness director that day, and then have to follow up on sales and marketing metrics. Stick to those 3 things and don't overschedule yourself. Yeah. And you're going to have those times too, right? Where somebody falls or an upset family member comes in. Well, you're going to have to also be flexible, right? What we talked about, being able to reset. But if you're going into your day as an executive director and you've got 15 things scheduled, you're not going to get them complete because you've got to schedule flexibility as well.
For over a century, Benny Keith has been a trusted leader in the food service industry. As a broadline distributor, we offer an extensive selection of products, delivering to 21 states through 10 distribution centers. We can help you create a thriving culinary culture by pairing quality products with customized solutions that elevate your residents' dining experience. Our team of registered dietitians provide unmatched customer service by modifying menus, selecting recipes, ensuring regulatory compliance, and more. Quality, value, and service are at the heart of everything we do. Benny Keith Foods puts the care back in healthcare.
That all makes so much sense because when you're really kind of thinking about like protecting your time and managing through that, you have all these unexpected things. You need to be able to, like you said, reset, thinking back to even bigger to that work-life integration. Sometimes it's 75% work and 25% life.
Correct.
So when you got a good day, flip it on its head and 75 life and 25% work. And so
Absolutely.
you need to get back to, I think, that bigger picture of it's integration and not balance for sure. So,
Yep, absolutely.
So as we wrap things up here, let's say I want to reconsider how I'm evaluating how I use my time. I definitely have some opportunities now. I know there are plenty of other executive directors and regional directors that could take advantage of this as well, especially thinking about the workday. What would you recommend if you were going to get us like a top 5 checklist, if you will? What would that look like from your vantage point that you seem to be successful for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody ever been on a diet? Anybody been to the doctor and maybe your cholesterol was high, right? And they say, hey, let's do a food log. Let's start writing down everything you eat and then bring it back in a couple of weeks and we'll review that. We'll look at medications, we'll look at diet, all of that good stuff. So using those concepts, one of the initial things I did, and I had no, history in time study. I just started writing down how I was spending my time. A lot of times it was in the evening when I was trying to debrief on, hey, I spent 12 hours at work today and I felt like I had nothing done. Every evening when I finally got either to my bedside or on my couch, something like that, I just started jotting down what I did. So maybe from 8 to 9, this is what I did. Then I had this take up 2 hours of my time. A family member came in and I'm telling you, one of the turning points was I had a 4-hour family meeting. 4 hours of someone in my office. And that's unheard of. Who really keeps somebody in their office for 4 hours? That was a time suck. Time got away from us. It was a good meeting. That was 4 hours of my day. That was half of my scheduled work day. So obviously that was an exception, but how did I consistently use my time? So once you start logging your time for a couple of weeks, you can start grouping things together. Well, why was I having this conversation with the food service director when really I needed to have one conversation each week, pointed conversation? These are the ways we can be effective. These are the ways we can drive metrics. These are the ways we can bring our food costs down, those types of things. Instead of being effective in one meeting, we were just kind of touching base a couple of times a week and nothing was happening because of that. So number one thing I would say is keep a time log. Do a time study of your week. I think the second thing I would say, again, is once you do that time study, pick out your 3 things. Start looking the night before or the morning of. Start picking out 3 things for work, 1 thing personal. And guess what? Maybe during your personal time, you're not going to have something that you have to do extra. Maybe it is like laundry and dishes and just run-of-the-mill things. But if you're going ahead and putting that one personal thing on your schedule and kind of holding that time holy, then nothing should be able to break that, other than a big exception or a crisis. Another thing I would say because we all need to refresh, right? We need to refresh. We need to have downtime. And this part falls in that integration piece. So I found that I was kind of wasting weekends. Occasionally, I would do a little extra work on the weekends to kind of get ahead for the week. But I felt like I was so exhausted because I was running 90 miles an hour during the week that on those weekends, all I wanted to do is like the bare minimum. I wanted to Netflix and eat popcorn. I wanted to spend time with my kids, but we really didn't enjoy it so much because I was so exhausted and tired. So what I started to do is calendar my weekend out. And if I knew that Saturday morning, I wanted to drink my coffee and sit on the back porch for an hour and a half before anybody woke up, I put a reminder on my phone and I put that on my calendar. And I calendared in all my events or all my me time and things I wanted to do that weekend in the calendar on the weekend. Now, I was a little bit less stressed about meeting those deadlines for those calendars. But the fact is, if you go from your 6 p.m. cocktail or beer on Friday night and you make it all the way to your 6 a.m. coffee or tea or Diet Coke on Monday morning, if you remove 8 hours every night of sleep, so Friday night, Saturday night, so remove those hours, there's 36 hours of passively productive time or chill time, right? 36 hours is almost enough time for a full-time job. So if you start thinking about your weekend hours that way, studies show that if you plan for those things that you enjoy, whether it's spending time with your family over a picnic, or you want to go hiking, or you want to go biking or bowling with your friends, if you schedule those in, they become more enjoyable because you're making sure that you're having them and holding that space wholly. Yeah. So not 5, but those are 3. And the thing about it is, if you keep going, it becomes overwhelming.
That top 3 list is perfect because we're talking 3 things in one thing, right?
Yeah.
I do love what you said about like being a little bit more deliberate about her weekends. I'm very bad about, I shut down because I've just been go, go, go. And the next thing I know, it's like, well, what just happened? It's Sunday at 6 p.m.
Right.
So,
Right. And that doesn't mean, Aaron, that if you're tired, you don't have to be productive on the weekends. But if you know that you want some downtime, schedule that downtime.
So smart. So, well, Chrystal, thank you so much for giving us this time
Sure.
to share about work-life integration and some of these, quite frankly, very simple to use approaches who will hopefully let us recapture everything the way we need to.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.TrestleHospitalityConcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.